this time and place. What now? What is going on? What is happening? This month's theme for worship is expectation. And the definition of that is a strong belief that something will happen or will be the case in the future. And last week, Reverend Ellie spoke eloquently on this topic. And this week, we will explore the same theme along a slightly different tangent. I'd like to take us on a short journey about personal expectations that we have with respect to the world around us. It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. Okay. That is a quote that Bob mentioned earlier, and it's in our order of service. And I picked it from an incredibly entertaining and informative movie that our family watched recently called The Big Short. In the beginning of the film, this quote is attributed to Mark Twain, but the Google verse says that that may not be. And so here's an example of a false expectation. In 1989, the Berlin Wall fell, and with the apparent victory of liberal Western democracy over Soviet communism, political scientist Francis Fukuyama famously declared the end of history. And how quaint and simple that idea seems now. It seems history has had other ideas as to its demise. And there is another old saying that I'd like to use, and it's attributed to Chinese philosophers, and again, Google may prove us all wrong. May you live in interesting times. And so I ask, what now? Every day I see the news delivered to our doorstep. Every day of some new surprise, new action, and a new tweet, a new development that we were not expecting. We are indeed living through interesting times. For the first time in my life, I feel that I'm living in an era where, as a history and political science buff, things are extremely interesting. And not good interesting, but scary interesting. Unmoored from reality interesting. Vertigo-inducing interesting. This morning, I'd like us to think about expectations from a cultural or societal perspective. Maybe I am a worrywart, but I feel an increasing unease and anxiety around the stability of our institutions and whether they can stand the stress that they are undergoing today. I am worried that as the political and historical processes move forward, what lays at the other end will be a vastly different America than the one I grew up in. If you follow the news, you have to ask, what now? And is there such a thing as too much disruption? Excuse me a sec. So the things I used to believe that now seem to be open to newer interpretations. I used to believe that presidents don't mock the handicapped. I used to believe that progressive companies like Volkswagen, the people's car, the vehicle of choice for hippies like me, would never, ever manipulate and cheat on environmental regulations. I used to believe that tech companies who have brought forth amazing solutions for problems I didn't even realize I had would be more sensitive to the impact of their offerings and not naively give haters the means to reach millions with their poison. I used to believe that there was a difference between journalism and propaganda, that Pravda, the Soviet state information machine, and US news organizations were universes apart. I used to believe that right-wing authoritarian regimes were on their way to the rubbish heap of political systems. I used to believe that when 90% of scientists say that there is a high probability of an event occurring, we believe them, trust their data, and have a fierce debate about how to address the issue. I used to believe that life expectancy would continue to climb until we all live into our hundreds. Wow. I'm done with the list. So, and many, many, many more things. Things that I thought, and maybe you agree, maybe you don't, I thought these were settled matters. but now they're back in play. I read recently in the New York Times about a study that shows an alarming number of people are in favor of chaos, that 40% of respondents said they were in favor of burning down our government and starting all over. Wow. Recently, at the annual meeting of the American Political Science Association, the winner of the Best Paper Award in the Political Psychology Division was this paper, and its title was A Need for Chaos and the Sharing of Hostile Political Rumors in Advanced Democracies. It postulates that a segment of the American electorate that was once peripheral and is drawn to chaos incitement, and that this segment has gained decisive influence through the rise of social media. All right, take a breath. I'm not into conspiracy theories, and I don't think there's a nefarious cabal out there looking to burn it all down. But witnessing current events and watching them with alarm has led to me, to a great deal of anxiety. The challenges to my cherished expectations have taught me, I think they're teaching me a valuable lesson. Maybe, just maybe, I've become stratified in my thinking and thus was caught unprepared for the changes that are underway. So I feel mad. I feel kind of bad, and I'll be honest, I'm fearful. I wonder if some of it is irrational, and it's an irrational fear of the unknown, an irrational fear of change. I've never thought that being a person of color, I would be vulnerable. I come from a Sikh tradition, and although you cannot tell outwardly, I do feel vulnerable right now. The recent murder of Jaswant Singh, an elderly Sikh man, in Tracy a few weeks ago, hit very close to home for me. We live, unfortunately, in a violent world, and random, senseless acts of violence are part of this insane reality. So I had to ask myself, was this a random act of violence, or did the suspect kill based on racial prejudice? And in a more general sense, I have an unease and uncertainty around what's happening in the world these days, and I question the ability of liberal democracies to contain the baser impulses of their internal factions. I observe with alarm cracks in the institutions that have kept these impulses in check, and we have a new generation of leaders that is enthusiastically exploiting those differences to their political advantage. I don't think this happened overnight. It's been a slow-burning fuse, evolving from using subtle dog whistles by kicking off presidential campaigns in places like Philadelphia, Mississippi, to having the green light to openly calling immigrants rapists and murderers. Well, I actually wrote down big, heavy sigh right about here. So we should all sigh. So I apologize. I apologize for painting such a dark portrait this morning. And I want to ask, what can we do about this? How can we change the trajectory of political discourse in this country and simultaneously find tools to help us cope? What is sustaining me right now are institutions like ours, a community of tolerant, loving people who remind me of the goodness in all of us. So I need to learn to be patient and remember individuals who've been through this before us, and maybe even far worse than what we're going through. And I have to ask myself, did I really think we were in a post-political age and there would be no more challenges like the ones we have already faced? No way. These challenges are like vampires who are never really gone. They only go into hiding, hibernating, until the conditions are fertile for their return. So how do we drive a stake through the heart of this latest version of the vampires? On the one hand, we have Antifa, whose street fighters are battling through direct action the bullies and haters, represented by groups like the Proud Boys. Is this the future? Brawling in the streets, rioting, settling our disputes through intimidation and violence? And are we surprised to see things like this happening when the President of the United States routinely and with careless throwaway comments divides us into tribes and then incites those tribes into violent action at his own political rallies. But I can't go there. I'm not 25. I don't look good in a gas mask and riot helmet. And in the end, really, we can't fight ourselves. And this, I have to say, was the shock realization for me. As I viewed the images of the riots and the fighting going on in the streets of Portland and read about these events and what is motivating both sides, I realized that the foot soldiers on both sides are really the same. I mean, I don't want to use the Charlotte, good people on both sides argument. That is not what I'm trying to say. I'm saying that there's a lot of commonality between those boys out there. They're mostly young men with prefab expectations of the world that they live in and a set of grievances that have been constructed on the foundation of those expectations. And I realized that in the emotional heat of the moment, I forgot one of the most fundamental lessons of history. I'm going to make you wait for it. The old fundamental lesson, the old trick of getting the poor and disadvantaged to fight each other. I hate to think of our leaders are delighted by what they have triggered, but it seems to serve their purpose. It promotes their interest by pitting underclass factions against each other, and through this form of distraction, enact laws that lock in their economic advantage. This is the heart of their strategy. But I feel truth will out. I believe we still have a lot of tools at our disposal, tools like democracy, one person, one vote, and the means to raise awareness through the same social media channels currently being used to incite hate. And because I am a Unitarian Universalist, I refuse to be a victim, and I'm actively looking for positive, love-inspired solutions. One approach would be to imitate the late, great Muhammad Ali. He courageously spoke truth to power, and his strategy in the ring was to float like a butterfly and sting like a bee. In boxing terms, this tactic has our protagonist being loose and limber and floating around his opponent until he sees an opening and then move in to effect his sting. In this metaphor, float like a butterfly means paying attention, understanding the terms of the debate, and putting ourselves in a ready state for action, identifying the best opportunity to make a difference. The sting like a bee is taking action. I had lunch with Helen Meyer a few weeks back, and she asked me what I was actively doing about the current state of affairs other than just talking and wringing my hands. She's tough. She suggested making a difference through action, through simple activities like volunteering for a phone bank to support a candidate in a state, not ours, in a state that's deemed by the Electoral College to be of critical national importance, or supporting movements to change the leadership in the Senate where so many democracy-damaging policies have been initiated. Whatever is needed, I am prepared to do to ease my mind and lighten the burden hanging over me. So what now? We continue to fight the good fight, to stay on message and on point through our values and our convictions, to shift our expectations to the new reality, not accepting them as inevitable and ceding control of the debate, but in recognizing the problem statement for what it truly means. The first step in effecting change is understanding the issue and the motivations of both parties. And we need to never lose sight of the tools we have at our disposal: democracy, common sense, and the turbocharged ability to reach millions through the tech tools. So slowly, and with a great deal of reluctance, I'm adjusting my expectations. There is a realignment occurring before our eyes, and although the pull of nostalgia is strong, we have to be realistic and square up to the new reality. To ignore what is happening is not only dangerous, but runs counter to our principle of a fearless seeking of truth, no matter how ugly or how inconvenient it might be. We will prevail. The arc of history bends towards justice. We are just discovering that the path is not straight. It has dips and turns, but inevitably, inexorably, it moves forward towards justice if we continue to believe in ourselves and our values and our experiences. We can still make a difference, and we must. Thank you.